At Iowa State, we do a lot of pork work. We are the #1 state in the country for raising pigs, and so we have a lot of questions regarding the quality of those pigs that we raise, and that's what you guys were doing today. So it's a pretty routine deal when we have a research project we do at Iowa State, that we would measure things like their loin-eye area, how much, and that gives us an indication of how much muscle they have. We might also look at the quality that the carcasses would have, and color would be a very important part of that, and also marbling. So we talked about that today in the cooler. You got to measure those with the National Pork Board's quality standards that we have, and assign some scores to that. So I indicated that at Iowa State we do a lot of this type of work where we look at meat quality. We have an undergraduate program focused in meat science. We're one of the few universities, land-grant universities, that put a lot of emphasis on meat science. But that's because Iowa is one of the leaders in red meat production. We're #1 in hog slaughter. We're in the top 5 in beef slaughter in processing, and we also do a lot of further processed products like ham, hot dogs, bacon. And so if there are students out there, or if you guys want to come up to Iowa State and learn about that, obviously you can come give me a call, and we can educate you in those areas. And one of the things I think is a bit of a misnomer is we talk a lot about the harvest side of livestock production, but our industry is really, really large. We have a harvest side where we have commercial slaughter plants. We also have bacon production plants. We also have plants that make further processed product like hot dogs and sausages and those kind of things. So not all the jobs related in the meat industry you have to work on a harvest floor. In fact, for folks who have a college education, that's hardly ever the case. We have a lot of jobs in microbiology, in general safety, in ingredient technology, and a lot of those businesses are located here in Iowa, in the Des Moines area, in fact. And so there's a lot of opportunity, and we certainly have a lot of things that students can be involved with. We have research. We also have judging teams that we can be a part of, and we also have, of course, classwork where you can learn a lot about the meat industry.
Now that the research trial has concluded, we need to collect our data and analyze it. We're going to analyze average daily gain, profit and loss, hot carcass weight, USDA grade and USDA carcass grade, color marbling, and percent fat-free lean, as well as the overall results from this experiment. Before we dive into the results, we need to talk about how these values are calculated. In order to calculate average daily gain, there are 3 things that we need to know. We need to know our ending weight of the pigs. This can be on the individual level or the group level, the starting weight, and how many days they were on feed. Looking at this image, you can see the equation is end minus start divided by days. And I've given some variables that you can plug in to run this equation yourself. One thing you have to keep in mind throughout all of the equations that we'll do to get our data is order of operations, or PEMDAS if you've ever taken an algebra class. Parentheses, exponents, multiplication, division, addition, and subtraction. Once you've gotten the average daily gain for your group of whether it's hogs or any other type of livestock, you can then move on to profit and loss. The first thing that we have to do in profit and loss is look at the overall cost to raise these animals. For this experiment, we only look at the cost of feed. Now granted, if we were livestock producers, we would look at other costs. For example, transportation, veterinary costs, depreciation of equipment, facility costs, and so on. But because this is educational purposes, we're simply going to look at the cost. To get this number, we're going to take the total pounds fed times the cost per pound. Each type of feed that we run in this trial has a different cost associated with it. I'm simply going to use our control costs for this number. Every group that we ran in this trial was fed the exact same quantity of feed. That was a controlled variable. To figure out the cost of feed, you simply take the total pounds fed times the cost per pound. To determine the income, you need 2 things. Number one, your expected income on a per pound basis, and then an ending weight or estimated ending weight. As you can see in this image, we have an estimated ending weight. We use the average daily gain throughout the experiment to extrapolate what they could have at the very end. The cost per pound is on the live basis. Now granted, you will not get 90 cents per pound live if you were to sell your hogs on the general market. There are other tools that you can use to get projected income. For example, Iowa State Extension has the Ag Decision Maker tools, which I highly recommend you check out. To run projected income, you simply take the estimated end weight times your selling price. Once you have your cost and your expected income, you can now determine your profit or loss. This is simply your income minus your cost of feed in this example. Once again, if we were producers on a larger scale, we would have other things besides just cost of feed. You will need to use your answers from the overall income and your total costs to get your profit and loss. Remember, especially as it relates to hog production, sometimes there is a loss, but there are other ways to make a profit when it comes to raising hogs. For example, some producers market the manure from the hogs, and that helps with the overall income side. The next factor that we're going to calculate is what's called the hot carcass weight, or hanging carcass weight, you might have heard it called. The acronym that we use is HCW. Now, in order for a pig to grade USDA Grade 1, and USDA Grade 1 is the number one thing that we want to have. At the very bottom would be a USDA Grade 4. So if we are hog producers looking to sell these pigs on the grid, we want to do everything that we can to ensure that our pigs grade number 1. In order to get a USDA Grade number 1, based off of HCW, our pigs have to have 60.4 or greater percent hanging carcass weight. There's a couple ways to do this. The first thing you could do is determine what their expected ending weight is and multiply that by 60.4% or 0.604. That would tell you what their expected hanging carcass weight is. Now, that's a little challenging because it's truly a prediction. If you're able to get the HCW after these pigs are harvested, you can take their hanging carcass weight divided by their live weight, and it'll give you their USDA grade. Keep in mind that the USDA grade is based off of a percentage, as shown here on this slide. The second USDA grade that we'll look at is based off of carcass merits. We're going to need a couple variables for this. We're going to need the last rib back fat, which you saw in the second part of this video series where the students were taking measurements. We're also going to have to take the muscle score. You saw that in part 2 as well. Looking at the slide, you can see that there are 3 options for muscle score. 1, 2, or 3. 3 being thick or heavy muscled, and 1 being thin, light muscled. It is important to keep in mind that a thinly muscled hog cannot grade USDA Grade 1. To run this equation, we will need to take the number 4 times our last rib back fat. In this example, I gave a variable of 0.9. That would be in inches, 0.9 inches, minus the muscling score. Keep in mind your order of operations when doing this. If the USDA grade comes out to be less than 1, you simply round up to it being 1. Remember, number 1 is the best, and number 4 is the least quality when it comes to USDA grade. The next factor that we're going to look at is the pork quality, both the color and the marbling standards. On this slide, you will see the continuum of color standards going from 1 to 6, as well as the marbling standards, which goes from 1 all the way to 10. Interesting fact for you, in the United States, most of the pork that has a marbling standard of 5 or higher is actually shipped to Japan. It doesn't stay in the domestic market. The reason for this is in Japan, we can get 4 times the selling price on a higher marbling pork than we can in the United States. Also, you need to think about demand when it comes to the Pacific Rim. A large percentage of our global population lives in countries such as Japan and China. And these people in these countries have a higher and higher demand of high quality pork. It's our job as producers in the state of Iowa, as well as the United States, to continue to deliver high-quality pork. So once again, looking at this continuum, the pork will be graded either on a 1 through 6 for color standards or 1 through 10 on marbling. In the second part of this video series, students were looking at the loin-eye area to determine marbling and colored standards. The next calculation that we're going to run is called percent fat-free lean. Think of it this way. If we took all of the meat that is in the pork and we somehow, using scalpels and tweezers, were able to pull out every single speck of fat, and we wanted to know how much high-quality pork is left, that would be our percent fat-free lean. Now, I doubt any of you want to sit there with tweezers and scalpels and pick out all the fat of pork. So instead, we're going to use the wonderful world of math to derive this answer for us. There's a couple things that we need in order to determine percent fat-free lean. We're going to need to know the hot carcass weight, which you've used in another formula. We're going to need to know the loin-eye area, which is a measurement that was taken off of the pork carcasses. Once again, you can refer to part 2 of this series to see how that measurement is taken. And we're also going to need to take fat depth. This fat depth is taken at the 10th rib. If you remember on the last equation that we did for USDA carcass grade, we used the last rib back fat. On percent fat-free lean, use the 10th rib back fat. Now, this equation can look scary at first, but just know that there are only 3 variables that you're going to plug in: your HCW, your loin-eye area, and your fat depth. The rest of it is simply remembering your order of operations. At the end, you will want to put this into a percentage form, as you'll see later on our results tab. In order to do that, you will take your answer to this equation, divided by your hot carcass weight, and multiply it by 100. As you can see on this slide, we've given some extra variables. So if you want to run the calculation on your own and check your work, we've given it the hanging carcass weight, the loin-eye area, and the fat depth at the 10th rib, and then the answer for percent fat-free lean. Looking at the results for this experiment, there are 5 main things that we use to determine which is the highest quality feed stuff for our hogs. We look at average daily gain, profit and loss, percent fat-free lean muscle, USDA grade, and USDA grade carcass. As you can see from these results, they're actually all over the board. For example, if you look at our control, the control won in the profit and loss, which makes sense because it was actually the lowest cost feed out of all 6 in the trial. But it did not win in average daily gain. In fact, it didn't win in any other category besides USDA grade. If you look closely at USDA grade, you will notice that all of our pigs had a USDA grade 1. This is actually something good that we look for in the meat industry, because we want our pork, as well as beef and other meat products, to be very uniform. Even though the pigs had different feedstuffs, they all came out in a very uniform fashion. If we look at an average daily gain perspective, our 5th trial came out the best. Actually quite a bit above second place, with an average daily gain of 4.8 pounds per day. Remember, there are 2 pigs in each pen, so each pig in this pen actually gained 2.4 pounds per day. Man, if we could do that as humans, Christmas break would be brutal on us. Other measurements that we examined, but don't go into the final results, are loin-eye area, coloring, marbling, and muscle score. The reason why those don't go into the final results is because those are simply variables that we need to plug into our fat-free lean muscle equation and our USDA carcass grade. You can go through these results yourself to see which ones scored the highest in those non-cumulative categories. If you look at percent fat-free lean muscle, the winning group, which was group number 3, came in at 61.29%, slightly edging out the control group at 61.14%. Once again, everybody scored a 1 on the USDA carcass grade, but it is interesting to note that on USDA grade carcass, the results were very, very similar. The group number 4, the Kent Feeds trial, came in number 1 for USDA grade. Keep in mind, number 1 is the best USDA grade, while number 4 is the least desirable. So while all USDA grades were pretty good for this entire trial, group number 4 was the best overall, scoring an average of number 1. The challenge with looking at this data is there is no definitive answer to which feed did the best. So I encourage you to look at our data, Determine your own opinion on which group of pigs you think did the best overall. Make sure that your opinion is based off of fact and you're looking at such thing as average daily gain, profit and loss, fat-free lean muscle, USDA grade, and USDA grade carcass. If you need a tiebreaker, you can look at such things as the last rib back fat, the 10th rib back fat, loin eye area, coloring, marbling, and muscle score. I hope you've enjoyed the last 3 videos for our research project. Once again, thank you to all of our sponsors, Hy-Vee for continuing to buy this pork, Kent Feeds for their generous donation, the Iowa Ag Literacy Foundation for a $400 grant to help us get started, Key Cooperative for providing our control groups, Nemo Feeds and Mies Feeds for supplying us with feed for 3 pens, Eurofins, who did all of our nutritional data for us, and once again, the Iowa Pork Producers Association for supplying us with this pork and being a continued supporter of pork in the state of Iowa.